In the vast sprawl of the galactic order, humans were never taken seriously. To most species, they were late arrivals, a civilization climbing awkwardly into the arena where giants had walked for millennia. The council chambers echoed with voices older than humanity's first cities, and in that echo, the human presence was nothing more than background noise. They were tolerated because diplomacy demanded it, not because anyone respected them. To the dominant empires, humans seemed fragile. Their lifespans were short, their bodies unimpressive, their homeworld a modest sphere of water and soil. Every evaluation ranked them low in military capability, cultural influence, and technological innovation. The council's analysts labeled them cooperative herbivores, creatures suited for treaties, trade, and compromise, not for survival in the predator's hierarchy of space. Even their appearance, expressive eyes, soft features, voices prone to warmth, reinforced the impression of harmlessness. The galaxy saw humans as negotiators, mediators, and nothing more. In every dispute, they offered compromise instead of threats, patience instead of anger. They rarely raised their voices, and when mocked, they responded with measured calm. This behavior convinced the galaxy that Earth's offspring were submissive by nature, incapable of ferocity. Around council tables, representatives from hardened warrior races joked openly about humanity's naivete, confident that no human would object. Yet, beneath the quiet smiles and diplomatic courtesies, there was something others failed to recognize. Humans listened more than they spoke. They watched carefully, memorizing mannerisms, weaknesses, strategies. While alien delegates mocked them, humans were learning. While others assumed disinterest, humans absorbed knowledge with predator focus, though the galaxy mistook it for passivity. Their calm was not weakness, it was patience. Alien scholars sometimes noted odd behaviors, but their warnings were dismissed. They recorded how humans studied predator species with unsettling fascination, asking questions not about victories but about tactics, hunts, and failures. They observed how humans practiced simulations of war far beyond the scale of their actual fleets, games where they tested strategies relentlessly. They noticed how humans endured insults with smiles that seemed too still, too deliberate. But no one took these observations seriously. The conclusion was always the same: humans lacked the ferocity needed to matter. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Humanity had grown on a world where survival meant adaptation, where every ecosystem was a battlefield of predator and prey. They had walked alongside beasts that hunted with teeth, venom, claws, and cunning. And though they rose above their wilderness, they never shed the instincts carved into them. They learned to hunt in packs, to plan ambushes, to endure fear until fear turned into strategy. They did not forget what it meant to be prey, and that memory shaped their rise into something more lethal than the galaxy could imagine. But to the empires seated on their thrones of arrogance, none of this mattered. They saw humans as negotiators with a talent for paperwork, a people more concerned with dialogue than with dominance. So they tolerated them, even laughed at them, secure in the belief that these newcomers would never threaten the balance of power. Humanity's patience was taken as surrender. Their restraint was mistaken for incapacity. Their silence was interpreted as fear. That illusion held until the first sparks of conflict. When a powerful empire laid claim to a human colony on the frontier, the council did not intervene. They argued that humans had no right to resist, that they lacked the strength to hold territory in contested zones. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Would humans beg for mercy? Would they abandon their settlers? Would they crawl before their betters? The consensus was clear. Humans were too weak to fight, too civilized to retaliate, too fragile to endure war. They expected panic. They expected tears, desperate pleas, maybe even submission. What they did not expect was the silence that followed, the unnerving, predator's silence of a species waiting, calculating, preparing. For the first time, an unease rippled through those who had always laughed. Something in the stillness of the human delegation felt unnatural, as if beneath the mask of diplomacy lurked something ancient and unforgiving, something the galaxy had overlooked for far too long. The council chambers filled with debate, voices rising with the confidence of predators circling what they thought was prey. The attack on the human colony was brushed aside as an inevitability, the natural order asserting itself. Powerful empires justified the slaughter as necessary expansion, while others laughed quietly, remarking that humans would now finally learn their place. To them, Earth's children were trespassers who had wandered too far from the shelter of treaties. The fate of their settlers was a warning, and nothing more. Representatives spoke as though humanity's reaction was already decided. They expected begging, perhaps desperate promises of tribute or concessions, or at the very least emotional outbursts. They predicted panic, surrender, or exile. But none of those predictions came true. The human delegation arrived as scheduled, their posture calm, their expression steady. They did not shout, they did not tremble, they did not mourn publicly. They spoke in measured tones, repeating their desire for peace, for stability, for order. That restraint unsettled a few, though most took it as further proof of weakness. What kind of species responded to an atrocity with patience? What kind of people spoke of diplomacy when their children bled on distant soil? To the galaxy's predators, it was laughable. They mistook the calm for cowardice. They whispered that humans lacked the instinct to defend what was theirs, that their history of negotiation had erased the primal drive to fight. Some openly joked that Earth's people would trade their colonies for empty promises if it meant avoiding battle. And yet, the words of the human representative cut sharper than most noticed. "We prefer peace," he said, his voice level, his eyes unwavering. "But do not mistake restraint for inability." The sentence hung in the air, and for a brief moment the laughter faltered. The calm delivery carried no plea, no threat, only certainty. Still, the chamber dismissed it as hollow posturing. Days later, the invading empire escalated further, raising settlements, broadcasting their conquest as spectacle. Survivors screamed warnings into open channels, their signals filled with desperation before being silenced. Those transmissions reached Earth, and every human world replayed them in silence. The galaxy anticipated breakdown. They expected a flood of supplications. Instead, what followed was unnerving. No sobbing voices filled the council floor. No panic-stricken envoys rushed to offer concessions. Humans merely requested a formal hearing, nothing more. That decision puzzled the council. Why waste time on procedure? Why not beg the invaders directly? To the arrogant, it was another sign of weakness, a ritual of diplomacy before inevitable surrender. They predicted humans would fold once more, perhaps asking for mercy in exchange for obedience. Rumors spread that Earth might abandon its colonies entirely, retreating back to the safety of its homeworld. When the day came, the council chamber was crowded. Delegates leaned forward, eager to witness the humiliation of the newcomers. The human ambassador entered without haste, carrying himself with the same unsettling composure as before. His expression gave nothing away, as though the massacre of his people were merely a matter of discussion, not devastation. He did not begin with anger, nor with grief. He simply stated the facts, acknowledging the attacks, listing the atrocities, outlining the crimes with a precision that sounded less like mourning and more like record-keeping. The council scoffed. This, they thought, was the end of humanity's illusion of strength. A species so obsessed with order and words could never endure war. Some laughed openly, mocking the idea that humans would dare resist. "They will talk until they are consumed," one delegate muttered. Others nodded in agreement. To them, diplomacy was the shield of the powerless. But beneath the surface, the illusion was beginning to fracture. Observers who watched closely noticed something in the ambassador's eyes, an absence of fear, a steadiness that did not match the situation. His voice never quavered, his breathing never faltered. This was not the desperation of a cornered prey animal. It was something else, something colder. The address ended without pleas, without concessions. The ambassador offered no surrender. He simply said that humanity had listened, humanity had endured, and humanity would respond. The words were delivered not with fury but with certainty, as though the response had already been decided, already set in motion, beyond anyone's power to stop. For the first time, silence pressed against the walls of the chamber. It was not the silence of victory or relief. It was the silence of unease, a tension that rippled beneath the arrogance of the council. Somewhere, deep in the instincts shared by predators across the stars, they recognized the calm for what it was. It was not submission. It was the patience of something that had been waiting for its moment to strike. The chamber waited for panic, but instead the humans revealed their hand. The ambassador stood before species older and stronger by every measurable standard, yet he spoke with the composure of a teacher correcting a class. You misunderstand. We are not here to beg. We are here to give you one chance. The statement echoed with a finality that unsettled even those convinced of human fragility. For a heartbeat, the assembly stilled, and then the laughter returned, desperate, brittle, masking unease. What could a young world possibly threaten? What could fragile creatures wrapped in diplomacy truly enforce? The answer came without flourish. The human raised his hand, activated a display, and the illusions shattered. Across the chamber, holographic feeds flickered to life, real-time transmissions from sectors thought secure. The images showed warships belonging to the invaders, massive constructs of metal and arrogance, torn apart in silent detonations. Their fleets were not meeting resistance. They were being dismantled methodically, targeted with precision that stripped away pride and replaced it with dread. Each vessel destroyed was not random. Command ships went first, then logistics, then escorts, cut down in perfect sequence, as though every weakness had been memorized long before the first shot was fired. Murmurs erupted. Delegates leaned forward, their confidence breaking under the weight of undeniable evidence. This was not desperation. It was not rebellion. It was orchestration. Humanity had been preparing in silence while the galaxy dismissed them as harmless. While council floors rang with laughter, Earth had studied every empire, every weapon, every tactic. They had hidden teeth behind soft words and now chose to bear them. The ambassador did not raise his voice. He spoke over the images with the same calm that had unnerved those who watched closely. We listened while you called us weak. We endured while you struck at us. You believed our patience was fear. It was calculation. Every predator reveals its habits when it thinks itself unchallenged. You showed us everything. The feeds displayed more than destruction. Entire fleets were cut off from resupply, their escape routes sealed before they realized they were in danger. Outposts fell without shots fired, isolated and abandoned as human forces bypassed their defenses to strike at what truly mattered. Survivors were left alive deliberately, their frantic transmissions spreading panic faster than human weapons ever could. The tactics were unmistakable, not the brute force of conquerors, but the clinical precision of hunters. Fear spread in the chamber. Those who mocked humanity days before now sat rigid, their instincts whispering what their reason denied. These were not prey pretending at strength. These were predators who had worn a mask of civility until the moment to strike arrived. The arrogance of the empires had blinded them to the obvious. Who but predators would smile so calmly under insult? Who but predators would study in silence, asking endless questions about war, about weakness, about failure? The ambassador let the silence grow heavy before he spoke again. We asked for peace. You chose to test us. Now you learn why restraint is not weakness. Now you understand why patience should not be mistaken for surrender. There was no boast in his voice, no demand, only certainty. It was the voice of a species that had already accepted the outcome. Delegates turned to one another, searching for explanations, for reassurance, but none came. Reports continued streaming in. Empires humbled, fleets burning, strategies unraveling against an enemy they had never considered worthy of fear. The realization struck with cruel simplicity. Humanity had not only prepared for war, they had prepared to win it decisively. They had been underestimated not because they lacked power, but because they had chosen to hide it until provoked. What unsettled the council most was not the destruction itself, but the efficiency behind it. Every move suggested forethought, every strike the product of analysis conducted long before the first colony was threatened. Humanity had been watching, cataloging, preparing to respond the moment arrogance turned into aggression. Their vengeance was not impulsive, it was the patient, inevitable strike of predators who had chosen their moment with absolute precision. By the time the displays dimmed, silence consumed the chamber. The laughter was gone, replaced by a heavy awareness that could not be dismissed. The galaxy was staring at a truth it had refused to see: humans were never harmless. They had simply worn diplomacy like camouflage, waiting until someone was foolish enough to draw blood. Now, the mask was gone, and every predator in the chamber recognized something terrifying. They were not looking at prey. They were looking at rivals. The lesson did not end with the display of wreckage. What unsettled the Council more than shattered fleets was the way humanity chose to wage war. They did not charge blindly into open battles. They did not waste ships on spectacles of power. They moved with the patience of hunters, cutting arteries before striking the heart. Entire supply convoys vanished without trace, leaving vast armadas stranded in the dark. Communications were severed, chains of command severed until admirals barked orders into silence. Garrisoned worlds woke to find themselves abandoned, their fleets recalled too late to matter, their defenses irrelevant in the face of isolation. Humanity did not merely destroy ships, they dismantled the confidence of civilizations. Whispers spread faster than reports. Captains spoke of human vessels appearing where no sensors detected them, striking with ruthless precision, then vanishing before retaliation could be organized. Colonies surrendered without resistance because fear had reached them before the fleets did. Prisoners spoke of a chilling pattern: humans always left survivors. Not out of mercy, but design. Those survivors returned carrying terror in their voices, spreading it like wildfire. Entire sectors crumbled without a shot fired because the thought of resistance against predators who struck unseen was unbearable. For generations, the galaxy had defined strength as visible might: armadas filling the stars, planets scarred by bombardment, the roar of overwhelming numbers. Humanity rewrote that definition. Strength, they proved, was knowing when not to strike, when to wait, when to bleed an opponent slowly until the will to fight collapsed. Every move they made was a reminder that this was not the brutality of conquerors but the precision of predators who understood psychology as well as warfare. Council delegates who once scoffed now sat in silence, their instincts gnawing at them. They recognized what was happening because it was written in their own predatory pasts. This was the hunt turned cosmic. Isolation of the weak. Encirclement of the strong. The deliberate spread of fear until even the thought of resistance felt suicidal. Humanity was not improvising. They were applying lessons carried from their earliest struggles on their homeworld, scaling them to empires who had forgotten what it meant to be hunted. The more the Council listened to reports, the more the image of humanity shifted. The calm smiles, the patient diplomacy, the endless studying, none of it had been weakness. It had been camouflage. Predators in the wild did not bare their fangs until the kill. They blended into the background, waiting for arrogance to blind their prey. Humanity had worn treaties like a hunter's disguise, sitting silent while the galaxy exposed its habits. Now the mask had been cast aside, and the true nature of Earth's offspring stood revealed. Terrified empires attempted to negotiate. Messages poured toward human envoys, promising concessions, demanding truces, offering alliances. None were accepted. The response was always the same, spoken with unshaken composure. "We will decide when this ends." The implication was undeniable. Humanity was not fighting for survival alone. They were reshaping the hierarchy of the galaxy, teaching every civilization that peace would not be granted by council decree, but enforced by the presence of predators among them. Reports grew darker. Admirals surrendered entire fleets rather than face human ambushes. Colonies abandoned their banners and declared neutrality when human warships entered orbit, not because of bombardments, but because the knowledge of what could come was unbearable. Some species whispered in fear that humanity's true weapon was not ships or guns, but patience. The patience to wait until arrogance left enemies exposed, the patience to exploit every mistake with merciless precision. Delegates avoided looking at the human ambassador when he walked the council halls. Those who once mocked him now lowered their gaze, their instincts screaming truths their words could not admit. They saw in him the reflection of their own nightmares, the quiet, watching predator, smiling as it measured the distance to strike. The galaxy understood, too late, that the humans had never been diplomats forced into weakness. They had been predators pretending to be diplomats, and they had played the part with terrifying perfection. Every empire carried scars of arrogance, but none as deep as those who believed humanity harmless. Now, in the shadows of their own ruined fleets, they whispered warnings to their children, praying that future generations would remember what their arrogance had cost. For humanity was not just a rival civilization. They were the reminder that beneath the masks of civility, beneath the trappings of treaties and words, the galaxy still belonged to predators, and humans had claimed their place at the top. Silence consumed the council chambers as the final transmissions arrived. Armadas that once boasted invincibility now surrendered without firing, entire empires capitulating before humanity's relentless precision. The galaxy, once drunk on its own power, was left staring into a void carved by its own arrogance. No one spoke. No one laughed. The quiet was heavier than any bombardment, for every being present understood the truth. The balance of power had shifted permanently. The human ambassador rose, his posture unchanged from the first day he entered those halls. No triumph colored his voice, no gloating marred his words. He spoke as if reciting a simple fact of nature. We came offering peace. You mistook it for weakness. We smiled because predators smiled before the hunt. Now you see us without disguise. The words carried no anger, yet they cut deeper than any weapon. Every delegate felt the weight of them settle like a chain across their throats. Messages flooded in from across the stars, pleas for treaties, desperate declarations of neutrality, promises of tribute, but humanity did not rush to accept. They allowed fear to steep into the marrow of the galaxy, letting every civilization understand that mercy was a decision only humans could grant. The ambassadors repeated their message with chilling consistency. You will remember this day. You will remember who enforced peace when your arrogance shattered it. It was not a threat. It was a command written in certainty. Across alien worlds, children heard stories whispered by their elders. Not tales of human diplomacy, but warnings of human silence. Parents told them never to mistake a quiet gaze for submission, never to provoke the species that had hidden fangs behind calm words. In marketplaces, in academies, in barracks, the lesson spread: humans were not one civilization among many. They were the reminder of what the galaxy had forgotten, that the universe does not reward arrogance, only vigilance. Fear reshaped politics. In every council meeting thereafter, when humans entered, the chamber stilled. Those who once scoffed now measured every word, every gesture, terrified of giving offense. Agreements once enforced by fragile consensus now carried weight because humanity stood behind them. War between empires declined, not from newfound morality, but because no one wished to risk drawing human attention again. Peace reigned, not as an ideal, but as the shadow cast by predators watching patiently from the edge of the chamber. The invaders who had struck the first colony never recovered. Their fleets lay in ruin, their leaders disgraced, their legacy defined by the day they provoked the wrong species. Generations later, their children still spoke of it with shame, recalling how one empire's arrogance had awakened a hunter that would never again allow itself to be ignored. Humanity had not merely won a war, they had etched a scar into galactic memory. What unsettled the galaxy most was not humanity's weapons, but their choice afterward. They did not demand conquered territory. They did not strip resources or enslave survivors. Instead, they enforced order with the same quiet certainty they had carried into the council chamber. They reminded everyone that peace was possible, but only under the watchful eyes of predators who tolerated no betrayal. This restraint, this terrifying discipline, made them untouchable. They were not conquerors seeking spoils. They were guardians enforcing dominance, predators who hunted not for hunger but for control. In the centuries that followed, stories grew into myth. Civilizations taught their children that humans were the apex, the species that wore civility like a mask, the hunters who could wait lifetimes before striking. In the darkness between stars, sailors whispered of unseen human ships watching, measuring, deciding when to act. And in every council gathering, when human delegates spoke, no one interrupted. No one dared. The lesson had been burned too deeply to forget. The day the galaxy understood still lived on in every hushed chamber and every whispered tale. They realized too late that humanity had never been weak, never been prey. They were predators pretending to be diplomats, and the moment their patience ended, the mask fell away. The galaxy had seen the truth, and the truth would never be forgotten.